Hello, Croeso Fulcher. Welcome back to the channel, guys. So I hope you're all well. I hope you're all having a good Sunday. Thanks for everyone who's already in the chat. Great to see you, Amber. Great to see you, Tina. Hey, Deacon. Hey, Loki. Great to see you all here. Thanks for tuning in. So this week didn't quite go to plan. So originally I wanted to go out and film for my visit to Stanwick on Wednesday. However, when I got there, the weather was terrible. I couldn't film. I couldn't do the drone. So subsequently, I ended up being delayed by a day because I'm trying to release a site visit video each week and a presentation. So because of that, I was unable to do the presentation today because I struggled focusing on multiple things as well. So I thought we'd try something new. I've been meaning to do this for a while, but because I've been so focused on the presentations and stuff, I've not been able to do it. But I've been wanting to present, certain news articles that are interesting, that are pertinent to the kind of things that we're interested in here, and myself and you viewers. So today is a great opportunity where I can actually do that, and as it's a little bit more informal, I can also, have a bit of the chat on the go. I can see what you're all saying, because when I'm deep into a presentation, I really struggle looking at the chat. Because I'm on the spectrum, I just hyper focus on one thing. So when there's stuff popping up on screen, it distracts me. I lose my place. So you get the idea. So I thought it's a great way to do something else and to get on some of these interesting news articles. So first off, I just want to say thank you for everyone who checked out my site visit video to Stanwick. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out. Here it is. I'm really proud of this video. I managed to write it, go and record it, and edit it together in a couple of days. It really is. The scale of this site is absolutely staggering. So the perimeter wall is 9 kilometers. So I do I do about 95% of it. I walk around 95% of the perimeter. There's been some amazing finds made here, including chariot fixings. Some of them are quite iconic as well. One of them is like a horse mask as well, which is it's totally fascinating. They found an Iron Age sword still in its wooden scabbard. It had been in one of the ditches that was full of water, and as a result, the wood's really well preserved. It's in the British Museum in London, so I'm going to plan a trip down there to go and check out some of these artifacts so you can see them. However, one of the most enigmatic find here, and we've been looking at this Indo-European horse culture. And I thought this was actually quite interesting because they found a male burial where a horse's head had been carefully placed onto the body. Now, they don't know exactly why. We can only speculate as to why, but it's certainly very interesting. They certainly had a big affinity for horses. The chariots were quite revered and high status. The horse burials as well. The horses seem to take a big prominent place in the burial rites. There's another burial pretty close to where this is from a different tribe, the Parisi tribe, also in Yorkshire. And I've got a short on it actually where I went to visit. It's called the Pocklington Shield, because they found a burial of a high status burial of a male buried in the chariot with his shield, and the horses were actually buried upright and they'd been posed as though they were still galloping. So fascinating stuff. So if you want to see more about that, I'm going to be going down to London to have a look at some of these chariot fixings. So there we go. Now, a couple of news articles. I have collected these over a period of maybe like 8 weeks, but they're all quite pertinent to what we're interested in. So let's get into that now. So the first one here. Now, this was from January 10th this year. Archaeologists discover intricately decorated tomb belonging to a doctor who treated Egyptian pharaohs 4,100 years ago. Now, what was interesting about this are some of his titles. So this burial, there seem to be inscriptions bestowing titles on this guy: Director of Medicinal Plants, Chief Dentist. And they also believe that he was a master in curing serpent bites and scorpion bites. Now, and they seem to connect that to invoking a deity. And I thought it was interesting because certainly in the Greek sphere, the ritual and healing seem to be quite intertwined. So let's read it out. Let's have a look at what they've got to say, because we've got all the same, hallmarks: master of herbs, drugs. We know that was very prominent, even later, because this is pretty early. This is 4,100 years ago, but certainly later, we see in the medical texts that they're using a lot of herbs, a lot of animal products as well, whether that's serpent venoms or other parts of other animal products, and also the interconnectedness of ritual and healing. So I just thought, let's have a look at this, because it's really quite interesting, because it shows that this kind of stuff was also going on in Egypt at an early period as well. So let's have a look. Archaeologists have excavated an intricately carved and painted tomb in northern Egypt. They think the 4,100-year-old burial chamber belonged to a prominent, multi-talented royal doctor, a physician who served ancient Egyptian kings as an expert in medicinal plants, dentistry, and venomous bites. And certainly in from the Greek texts that I've seen, the serpent bites seem to be a big issue for them. So, and they seem to have got quite a knowledge of the venoms as well. A team of French and Swiss researchers discovered the tomb in Saqqara, the necropolis of the ancient capital city of Memphis, according to a statement from Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. This incredible find adds to Saqqara's rich legacy as one of Egypt's most significant archaeological sites, writes the ministry. The tomb is adorned with stunning carvings and vibrant artwork, including a beautifully painted false door and scenes of funerary offerings. And yeah, let's try and zoom in on that a little bit so you can see that a bit better there. But yeah, it's quite incredible, really. I have the utmost admiration for stone carvings and sculptures. It can't be an easy thing to master. Inside the tomb, researchers found a stone sarcophagus bearing the name, apologies if I get this wrong, Teninebofu in hieroglyphics. The inscriptions also indicate that he was a chief palace physician, priest, chief dentist, director of medicinal plants, and conjurer of the goddess Serket, an Egyptian deity known for curing venomous snake and scorpion bites. So this goddess sounds really interesting, and I find it fascinating because later they seem to allude to the fact that this priest or physician conjuring the god seemed to indicate that he was an expert in treating these things. So I just wanted to kind of highlight how those two things kind of intertwined. The doctor may have served under Pepi II, a pharaoh of ancient Egypt's old kingdom around the 23rd century BC. He was crowned as a child and retained the throne for 60 to 90 years. And when he died, he too was buried in Saqqara, entombed in a pyramid. The Saqqara necropolis has been extensively looted over the millennia, according to the translated blog post from the researchers. They only found small fragments of funerary materials, but the painted walls alone made the discovery exceptional. As Life Sciences Owen Jarrus reports, the paintings actually depict objects that the doctor might have used, such as jars and vases. So that's pretty interesting. So you've got these images of jars and vases. Now, for them to take a prominence on a wall carving or painting, certainly seems to indicate that it was important. The doctor's title of, now this is the bit I just wanted to highlight, because this is what seems to show that the cult ritual practice and the healing seem to be intertwined. So the doctor's title of conjurer of the goddess Serket means he was a specialist in poisonous bites. A research team leader, Philippe Colombert, an Egyptologist at the University of Geneva, tells Live Science. The other titles on the sarcophagus are quite rare: Director of Medicinal Plants. And this has only been found on one other ancient Egyptian artifact. And Chief Dentist is also very unusual, Colombert says. Now, from some of the Greek medical texts I've seen, such as Galen, they seem to be focused on, well, he seems to definitely make reference to certain things that can, for example, clean the teeth, that can help heal wounds and stuff. They were definitely looking at the curing of poisonous bites as well. So, and obviously medicinal plants played a huge role in that. So I just wanted to highlight that it doesn't seem out of place. However, this is a lot earlier than that. So that is, you know, quite interesting that they had such knowledge so far back. Evidence for ancient Egyptians' dentists is extremely scarce, as Roger Forshaw, an Egyptologist at the University of Manchester who wasn't involved in the research, tells Live Science. The ancient Egyptians are known for their advances in medical science, and they possessed extensive knowledge of human anatomy. Thousands of years ago, they were treating brain cancer via surgery, diagnosing the condition now known as diabetes, and building prosthetics. It's quite incredible to think, really. We are talking about a society that at the time had the most advanced medicine that ever existed, as Edgard Camaros, a paleopathologist at Spain's University of Santiago de Compostela, told History.com's Jesse Greenspan last year. Many ancient Egyptian doctors were specialists, focusing on a singular body part or sickness. And according to the 5th century BC Greek historian Herodotus, he wrote, "All the country is full of physicians, some of the eye, some of the teeth, and some of what pertains to the belly, and some of the hidden diseases." As such, Tetine Bofu's numerous and rare titles indicate that he held a high status during the reign of Pepi. As Colin Bird tells Live Science, he was certainly the main physician at the royal court, so he would have been treated, so he would have treated the pharaoh himself. So there you go. I believe that there's links, hyperlinks in there. So if you do want to go in and check out some of those sources, then I would urge you to do so. So I'm just going to have a look to see what people are saying in the chat there. This is the good thing. I can catch up on what you're all saying. Thanks, Amber. That's really kind of you to say it. Thank you so much. Hey, Valerie, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. GRD, let's go indeed. Hey, Carl, great to see you. I'm envious of your beaches and weather down in Florida there. I could definitely do with some of that right now. Feels like we've had perpetual cold and misery, with the exception of the day I was filming the other day, of course. Hey, enjoy the show. Hey, Banner, great to see you. Hey, Vox. Hey, James, all the way from Oregon. Great to see. Yeah, JRD Pharmacon, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. Carl makes a good point here. We still get the majority of our pharmacological substrates from plants. That's it. When you look at a lot of these things, you know, nature provides. No, I haven't. Data being collected. So data being collected just says here, not sure if you're following the recent discovery in January of the first potential Casca site in Anatolia. No, I've not. I'll definitely look into that. That's very interesting. I've not heard of that. So thank you very much for the heads up. Maybe I can look at that in a future episode, but I'll certainly be researching that in my spare time. I'm sorry if there's some bad ads on there. Enjoy the show. I'll have to sort that out. Hey, GSMMW, great to see you. Right, let's jump into our next article now. This is from Nature. So we've been looking at these early Proto-Indo-European or groups that spread the Proto-Indo-European language. And this is an interesting study that's just come out just on the 5th of February, so not too long ago. And it's a study about the archaeogenetics relating to the spread of the Proto-Indo-European languages and where they think they possibly originated. So let's have a look and see what they've got to say. So the title here, How One Language Family Took Over the World, Ancient DNA Traces Its Spread. Millennia-old genomes suggest Indo-European tongues originated from the Caucasus mountain region. And obviously this region seems to also be mentioned in, you know, some of the mythologies and stuff. So certainly certainly held some significance. Also, not far from the Black Sea. You know, I think they believe it's a little bit further north in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So very fascinating, very pertinent to the stuff that we've been looking at here. Ancient genomics researchers have pinpointed the homeland of a nomadic tribe that transformed the culture and genetics of Europe and Asia, revealing a potential source for the Indo-European language family spoken by much of the world. Genomes from more than 400 individuals suggest that the Yamnaya Bronze Age herders from the steppes of present-day Russia and Ukraine emerged along the northern shores of the Black Sea. The findings are published on the 5th of February in Nature. I think they are truly groundbreaking, says Christian Christiansen, an archaeologist at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. This really solves two big unresolved questions. The first is the origin of the Yamnaya. And in some of the videos we've looked at, for example, the Etruscans, despite not having an Indo-European language, they still have some of the Yamnaya genetics, and obviously the Yamnaya are kind of associated with metallurgy, the Indo-European languages, obviously, as we're discussing here, and also they later become more associated with horse culture, but definitely nomadic pastoralism as well. So, yeah, really fascinating here that that it seems to give a bit of an insight into the first origin of the Yamnaya. The second was posted in the 18th century, when scholars first noticed similarities between classical Greek and Latin and Sanskrit, hence, you know, Indo-European, an ancient language from South Asia, and suggested a common origin. Okay, so this is when they first noticed that there were similarities between these languages that were spread over these regions. So they realized that there was a common origin. They termed it Proto-Indo-European. Nearly half of the world's population speaks at least one of the roughly 400 Indo-European languages. These include nearly all European and Central Asian languages, as well as those from South Asia to Iran. This Indo-European story has been a mystery for 200 years, and now, step by step, no pun intended, we are coming closer to the solution, says Volker Heyde, an archaeologist at the University of Helsinki. For decades, the leading theory of the ubiquity of Indo-European languages was that the early farmers living in a region known as Anatolia, which includes present-day Turkey, exported languages in the family as the agricultural revolution spread, starting around 9,000 years ago. The Anatolian hypothesis, however, took a blow in 2015 when two blockbuster ancient genomic papers identified a migration of Yamnaya herders across Eurasia beginning 5,500 years ago. This and subsequent work showing the arrival of steppe ancestry in most places that Indo-European languages are spoken was ammunition for the steppe hypothesis that Yamnaya were responsible for seeding Indo-European languages far and wide. Yamnaya ancestry is like a tracer die whose spread you can connect with Indo-European language spread, says David Reich, a population geneticist at Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts, who co-led the latest studies. But even with the genetic evidence, the steppe hypothesis has a major problem: how to explain the Anatolian branch of Indo-European. So this seems to have been problematic for scholars for quite a while. Some scholars even use the term Indo-Anatolian, which includes Hittite, a language used by a civilization that flourished in modern-day Turkey in the 2nd millennium BC. So I've been talking a little bit about the Hittites over the last couple of videos, especially when I've been talking about the Pelasgians and how they seem to retain certain non-Indo-European elements with regards to their worship and practices. And I'm kind of made a comment on how potentially a similar thing could have happened, where you've got early branches of the Indo-Europeans branching off. Maybe there's not enough of them to fully assimilate the native culture that they come into contact with, kind of create a bit of a hybrid group of people after they mix with them. Because in the case of the Hittites, when they migrated from the north into Anatolia and they came into contact with the Hatti, they spoke neither an Indo-European, or it's generally accepted, I should say, that they spoke neither a Semitic nor an Indo-European language. However, when the Hittites came, they kind of subjugated them, created a caste system, for want of a better word. However, the elite ruling class still seem to adopt some of their cultural practices, so some of their deities, some of their practices, and also they seem to also adopt some of their phrases. Some short sayings are recorded in the Hattic language, and they continue to call the region the land of Hatti as well, which is obviously the name of the region before the Hittites got there. So this has always been really interesting to me. So this has got me thinking of these early branches coming out, meeting autochthonous native groups, and how there's a bit of a mixing, and also I think this could be maybe why certain areas such as the region where the Basques were, where the Etruscans were, if they're a bit more isolated, perhaps that's why the language didn't fully take hold, because maybe a smaller group of people only managed to go there rather than a larger migration. But this is just my opinion based on the evidence that I've seen thus far, and of course that's subject to change. But even with the genetic evidence, the steppe hypothesis has a major problem: how to explain the Anatolian branch of Indo-European. Some scholars use the term Indo-Anatolian, which includes Hittite, a language used by a civilization that flourished in modern-day Turkey in the 2nd millennium BC. Geneticists have failed to find Yamnaya ancestry in ancient Anatolian speakers. In search of that connection, Reich and his colleagues hoped to identify the genetic origins of the Yamnaya. This has been a challenge because of the group's rapid expansion of a nearly identical genetic signature. It looks like a kind of cancer tumour, and you can't say where the origin of the tumour is because it expanded so fast, says Reich. It's a bit of a strange analogy there to use. I don't know why you'd immediately think of that, but never mind. To overcome this, Reich and his colleagues, including scientists in Russia and Ukraine, generated genome data from 428 ancient individuals, including hundreds of Yamnaya people and individuals who predated them, living across the steppe and further southeast along the Caucasus Mountains. The approach identified a genetic signature in people living in a region between the Caucasus Mountains and the lower Volga River, which is just to the north. Between the Caucasus Mountains and the lower Volga River to the north, that connects the earliest Yamnaya and ancient Anatolians. Reich's team found that the Yamnaya emerged when people with Caucasus lower Volga ancestry moved west around 6,000 years ago and mixed with a diverse group of hunter-gatherers living along the Black Sea. So, just to give you an idea of some of these groups of people, it's generally accepted that you had farming kind of evolved on the east coast of the Mediterranean. And what they mean by that is crops were being selectively bred for traits that benefited crop yield, traits that benefited people, essentially. And these were called Natufians, and they moved north into Anatolia, mixing with hunter-gatherer groups, and they created what they would go on to be what academia terms early European farmers. Now, what this source is saying is this group that they're talking about, it's a Yamnaya ancestry moving southwest. It says west here, and also meeting and mixing with these diverse groups of hunter-gatherers that were in the region. So it looks like you have farming groups moving north, mixing with hunter-gatherers, and Yamnaya pastoralists moving, south and west and mixing with hunter-gatherers. And, there's a lot going on then really in this region at this early period. Based on this evidence, the researchers think that the earliest Indo-European languages were spoken by people living in the Caucasus Lower Volga, who then carried them to Anatolia and to the Black Sea steppe, where the Yamnaya and their descendants spread them further still. The geneticists stress that migrations aren't the only way languages transmit, and that their work provides a hypothesis for others to test. This is a very good case for the solution to the Indo-European problem, says Iosif Lizaridis, a Harvard population geneticist who co-led the studies. But we can't prove these people spoke an Anatolian language because they're not buried with tablets saying, I'm an Anatolian speaker. So yeah, I guess this is going to be the problem with, or the issue that they're going to encounter going this far back, is you're only really going to be able to come to a conclusion as to what language was spoken if there's any inscriptions essentially, or any metallurgy or anything like that. So if you're kind of making your way in the blind in a sense if you're not finding these in the environs consistent with the remains of the people that they're finding. This is the first evidence we have that shows there was a migration into Anatolia that could have potentially brought Indo-Anatolian languages, says Gus Kronen, a historical linguistic at Leiden University in the Netherlands, but he's pretty sure it won't be the final word. Paul Hegarty, a historical linguistic at Pontifical Catholic University in Peru in Lima, who co-led a 2023 study that argued for a hybrid origin of Indo-European languages in both the steppe and among early farmers. So that's interesting. So he's talking here about a hybrid. So Indo-European languages in both steppe pastoralists and early farmers. Very interesting. I'll have to take a further look at that. So he sees the latest paper as a retreat from the strictest versions of the steppe hypothesis, because it suggests that Indo-European could have originated further south in the Caucasus. It's a step away from the steppe hypothesis, he says, because obviously it can't be called the steppe hypothesis if it's here in the Caucasus. Reich thinks that genetics have now contributed most of what it can to understanding where Indo-European languages came from. But he and his colleagues are eager to further narrow down the origins of the Yamnaya and their ancestors. Doing so, however, could require diplomacy. The two Nature papers had started more than a decade ago, and it just goes on to say here that due to the Ukrainian war, that obviously Russian and Ukrainian researchers are not working together, which is kind of holding up a bit of the research. So, however, they've obviously got a lot of the way to go. It sheds a little bit more light. It progresses things forward, but still not a cut and clear conclusion at this stage. But nevertheless, very interesting and pertinent, essentially, to what we've been following here in some of the presentations. So, and I've just realised I didn't share the screen there. So sorry, everybody. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at what everyone's saying in the chat so I can catch up with you all. That's right, Carl. The Vedic culture also seem to have the caste systems. And yes, the Proto-Indo-European rabbit hole is indeed very, very deep. It's a complex web, so it's interesting that they've made some progress here, but as I've said, it's still no conclusion, really. It's still a lot of work to go. Okay, let's take a look at the next source here. And I thought this was interesting. So this is an old papyrus that was found in ancient Palestine, and it's a Roman document. However, it's written in Greek, and I just thought it was quite interesting to show here that that these ancient documents that the Romans were writing in Greek. So, of course, some of the authors, such as Marcus Aurelius, he writes in Greek. It should be no surprise, really, that that the Romans were using Greek to some extent. So I just thought another interesting article just to show. Let me just pop it up on screen so you can follow along here, because I forgot to do that on the last one. I'm really sorry. Still getting to grips here with using StreamYard. So researchers have deciphered a nearly 2,000-year-old true crime papyrus. The Greek document details a court case in ancient Palestine involving tax fraud and provides insight into trial preparations in the Roman Empire. So look, tax fraud going on 2,000 years ago. So, you know, people have been trying to get away with paying taxes for a very, very long time. So let's have a look at what it's got to say. So back in 2014, a researcher from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem rediscovered an ancient papyrus while organizing a storeroom in the Israel Antiquities Authority's Dead Sea Scrolls unit. Once found in the Judean desert, the document script had previously been classified as Nabatean, an ancient Aramaic language, but papyrus expert Hannah Cotton knew better. When I saw it marked Nabatean, I exclaimed, "It's Greek to me," the researcher says in a statement by the university. And let's just have a quick look at this. Let's see if I can zoom in on this for you guys. It amazes me that, that some of these documents survive. And just like the find at Stanwick, that wooden scabbard, that just blew my mind when I found out that it had survived. Cotton and a team of experts spent the next decade deciphering the 133-line text, and their findings were recently published in the journal Tuche. Turns out the document is the longest Greek papyrus ever found in the Judean desert, and its newly translated content is particularly unique. A Roman lawyer's detailed notes about the trial of two men accused of tax fraud. This is the best documented Roman court case from Judea. Apart from the trial of Jesus, says study co-author Avner Ecker, a historian at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, in the statement. Per the study, the papyrus was likely written on the eve of the Bar Kokhba revolt, a 2nd century Jewish uprising against Roman rule. The Roman Empire had colonized Judea, the southern part of ancient Palestine, some 200 years earlier. By 132 AD, various Roman incursions upon Jewish life, including bans on religious practices, had taken their toll. The dwindling populations of Jews in Palestine revolted. The rebellion, led by a man named Bar Kokhba, was crushed by the Romans in 135 CE, and Jews were subsequently banned from Jerusalem. The newly translated papyrus was written after Roman Emperor Hadrian's visit to Judea around 130 CE, and before the Bar Kokhba revolt, per the study. Excuse me. It details Rome's case about two individuals, Gadalius and Saulos, accused of forging documentation about selling and freeing slaves to bypass paying Roman taxes. Forgery and tax fraud carried severe penalties under Roman law, including hard labor or even capital punishment, says study author Anna Dolganov, a papyrus expert at the Austrian Academy of Sciences. The papyrus was written in vibrant and direct language by a strategizing prosecutor, so he's being very direct. So I can only imagine the tone of the document. Advising another lawyer about pieces of evidence and anticipating objections, per the statement. The document also contains a rapidly drafted transcript of the judicial hearing itself. As Dolganov says in the statement, this papyrus is extraordinary because it provides direct insight into trial preparations in this part of the Roman Empire. Significant portions of the document are missing, making conclusions about the trial's participants difficult to draw. Still, the researchers write that the prosecutors were likely functionaries of the Roman fiscal administration and suggest the defendants were Jews. The papyrus also makes mention of an informer who denounced the defendants to Roman authorities. As Live Science Christina Kilgrove writes, the papyrus sheds light onto the long debated question of whether or not ancient Jewish people owned slaves. The documents mention that Saulus's family owned multiple slaves, but whether these enslaved people were Jewish is unclear. The trial's location and the case's outcome also remain mysterious. Per the study, proceedings may have been interrupted by the Bar Kokhba revolt. Somehow, this papyrus ended up among a collection of documents stored in caves in the Judean desert, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were rediscovered in the mid-20th century. A study author, Fritz Mithoff, a historian at the University of Vienna, says in the statement that papyrus showcases the Romans' governmental reach. They regulated private transactions even in the remote regions of the empire. Okay, so there you go, guys. I just thought that was really interesting, just showing their that people were still evading tax even 2,000 years ago. So sometimes nothing changes. And I just wanted to show you here because it's a good example of how the Greek language was being utilized in the Roman Empire during this period and in this region. So I just thought that was interesting there. So I'm just going to have a quick look again through the chat so I can keep up with you all. Hey, Fats Rabbits, great to see you. Hey, Violence is Life. Hey, Sean Conrad, thanks for joining us. Great to see you. Hey, Doc Valiant. Great to see you all there. So we've also got another interesting piece of information that I want to show you, which is involving the Nebra Sky Disc. So I've mentioned the Nebra Sky Disc in previous episodes, especially when I was looking at some of the old sources. Now, these are some of the first videos I did looking at some of the old sources, which said that the Phoenicians, well, they assert that they were trading as far as the British Isles, specifically tin. Now, there's always been speculation about the Cassiterides, which means the Tin Islands from the Greek sources. Some speculate it may be the Scilly Isles. And when I was making these videos, I used the Nebra Sky Disc as an example of tin that was mined in Cornwall, ending up in a piece of metalwork that was found all the way over in Germany. Because what seemed to be happening is this Bronze Age trade network. You know, it seemed to span potentially as far north as the Baltics, certainly the British Isles, all the way over to the Iberian Peninsula as well, and even as far as the Mediterranean. So this Bronze Age trade network that seemed to be going on. Later on, during the Iron Age, it certainly seemed to be facilitated by a group of people called the Veneti, and they were in the region that is the modern-day Carnac in Brittany, and they were facilitating the tin trade from Cornwall. And some of the classical accounts say that they would there's an island that was cut off from the rest of Britain during coastal times. You know, it was tidal. So when the tide went out, there was a walkway all the way to the island. It says that they would mine the tin, they would knock it into what I describe as like knuckle shapes, knuckles of tin. They would wheel it across the when the tide went out, they would wheel it across the causeway to the island, and then this island area was where that the tin could then be carried across to mainland Europe, and then it would go overland into, you know, Germany, France, or modern day Germany and France. And this Nebra Sky Disc was a prime example of an artifact that showed that the tin from Cornwall was making itself all the way over to Germany, modern day Germany, where this artifact was found. Now, they've done more recent studies on the Nebra Sky Disc. They've even tried to recreate its, recreate it so they can study how it was made. And they believe, or the evidence concludes, that in the Bronze Age, they had far superior metalwork than what was originally thought. So it seems that this was forged multiple times. I think it off the top of my head, it says up to 10 times. It was heat treated, and it had to be heat treated up to 700 degrees. And as well, it was incredibly difficult to make because it was less than 5 millimeters thick in the middle, 1 millimeter thick at the edges. So very difficult to make something that shape especially because the thicker section in the middle, it's harder to heat it in the middle as well. So let's take a look. So first off, we're just going to look at the news article which relates to it, and then I'm just going to have a look at the Nature Journal as well, just to get a bit more nuance out of it. And I know you guys like going into the, you know, some of the particulars, so we're going to have a look at that as well. So boom, here we go. Archaeology breakthrough into 3,600 years old sky disk mystery. New scientific methods have allowed archaeologists to learn more about how the enigmatic Nebra Sky Disc was manufactured in the Bronze Age. And this is from December last year, so it is a little bit older. Here, let me just get rid of this pop-up. That's the problem with these articles; they're just ridden with pop-ups. So here's the an image of the Nebra Sky Disc, just so you can get a sense of its scale. Very fascinating. They believe it's one of the oldest depictions of the sky as well. So archaeologists may have solved one of the mysterious... let's start again. Archaeologists may have solved one of the mysteries surrounding an enigmatic artifact that is more than 3,600 years old. The Nebra Sky Disc is believed to be one of the oldest, is believed to be the oldest precise depiction of the heavens in human history. So wow, that's fascinating. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Could that be the Pleiades, perhaps? So blatantly the sun and the moon. Very, very interesting. And I've always been captivated by it. And it was found with a couple of swords as well, and a dagger. And the swords, you know, when something it's that old, it almost looks like futuristic in a sense. It's, when I look at it, it kind of reminds me of that when you look at the swords. So God, get rid of that pop-up. Sorry, guys. The beautiful Bronze Age object is believed to have been used to observe and track astronomical phenomena such as solstices. Made from copper, tin and gold mined from across Europe, it is attributed to the Central European Unetice culture, and it is believed to have been created in at least 4 stages as new astronomical observations were added. So it was updated seemingly then. However, scientists have long been puzzled about the precise manufacturing process that was involved. Now, using cutting-edge new methods, modern scientists have discovered that the ancient cultures of the Bronze Age had a far greater level of metalworking expertise that was previously realised. And there's another image of it there. The disc was discovered in 1999 by illegal treasure hunters using metal detectors near the town of Nebra in Germany, and obviously that's what it's named after. It was a part of a buried hoard that included 2 swords, 2 axes, a chisel, and fragments of bracelets. And check out those swords and the axes, because, as I said, they look incredible to me. They're very enigmatic. Instead of declaring their find, which is a legal requirement in Germany, I think they've doubled it up there. That's what confused me. They sold their haul on the black market. The disc changed hands multiple times, often at an inflated price, before it was seized in a police sting operation in 2002. And you know what? You can get hefty sentencing for this kind of thing. There was some metal detectors in Britain who found a cache of coins, and I believe they got 10 years for not declaring it. So hefty sentences. Its authenticity was initially questioned due to its extraordinary nature, but through analysis confirmed it was a genuine artifact from the Bronze Age. Despite being found in Germany and associated with Central European cultures, chemical analysis shows that some of the metals used in its earliest construction came from Cornwall. So as I said, that's actually why I used it in my videos. And others came from Austria. Now housed in the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle, Germany, it is recognized as being one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century. It has fueled debates about early European societies, astronomical knowledge, and cultural sophistication. A new study will fuel that discussion even further, as it shows Bronze Age craftsmen had a greater level of expertise than had previously been acknowledged. The latest metallographic research published in Nature's Scientific Reports shows it was manufactured from a flat cast, followed by a hot forging process, which saw the disc heated to around 700 degrees C and maintained at that temperature as well, which is not an easy thing to achieve, and forged approximately 10 times. The paper's authors write, the Nebra Sky Disc is an extraordinary relic of the early Bronze Age and an impressive example of the profound knowledge that was available in the Unetice culture. Since it provides a detailed understanding of astronomic correlations, it became a UNESCO memory of the world. Furthermore, its manufacture was by no means trivial. While the production of axes and sheet metal jewellery by forging techniques were common practice in the Central European early Bronze Age, the Nebra Sky Disc is, according to current knowledge, unique in its shape, size and volume. Because, yeah, as I said, it wasn't an easy thing to achieve, and they have found similar things, but on a much, much smaller scale. The influence of the Unetice culture on early Bronze Age metallurgy has been often discussed, with a particular focus on innovative casting techniques. In this context, the Nebra Sky Disc documents that the Unetice culture craftsmen were excellent and innovative coppersmiths with extensive experience in sophisticated bronze manufacturing, including casting, forging, and heat treatment. So there you go, and we're going to jump into the journal here. So, oh yeah, look here. Let's have a look at the image. So yeah, the Pleiades, they are attributing this cluster here to the Pleiades, which is interesting. We have a crescent moon, a sun, a horizon arc, they believe, and they believe this is a ship. So that's interesting because we've been discussing early travel and astronomy and the Polaris, which I talked about in my Larissa presentation, and how it seems to be a rudimentary form of sea navigation based on constellations, and the Pleiades was one that is utilized, as well as some of the other major ones that you'd expect to see there. So check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, the Polaris is a very fascinating instrument, so do check that out. So this was published on the 21st of November here. Archaeometallurgical investigation of the Nebra Sky Disc. I don't want to get bogged down too much in the particulars because they're using quite a lot of jargon here that we might not immediately understand, but there's some interesting bits of info in the introduction that we're going to read, and they've also got some images here of the process. So look, they got a metal worker here to attempt to recreate it, and look, here were different replicas that they made as well. So it's good they've really got into the nitty-gritty. They've tried to recreate it, and they've taken more samples of it as well. So let's get into it. The World Heritage object, Nebra Sky Disc, is one of the best investigated archaeological objects. The origin of the raw materials it is made of is well known. However, its manufacturing process was not completely clear. Investigations were made in order to clarify the steps of manufacturing, from the initial casting to the finished disc using the latest metallographic techniques. Therefore, a small piece from the outer part of the disc was investigated and compared with a replica. Both were prepared regarding the metallographic procedure. Microstructural analysis was made by optical microscopy on a coloured etched surface, EDS and electron backscatter diffraction. So these were just different ways that they tested it. And it says here, for the investigation of mechanical properties, micro hardness measurements were made. It could be found that the Nebra Sky Disc was manufactured from a flat cast, followed by a hot forging process. During the forging process, the disc was heated and forged for approximately 10 times. So they've gone to quite extreme lengths there to make sure that it was going to last. The Nebra Sky Disc is the oldest precise depiction of the heavens in human history. It is inscribed in the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, and is one of the most thoroughly studied archaeological objects in the world because its cosmological iconography offers a unique insight into the mindset of early Bronze Age people. It was discovered and looted by unlicensed metal detectorists on the summit of the Mittelberg Hill near the town of Nebra, Saxony-Anhalt in central Germany in 1992. The disc was included in a hoard which included 2 superbly crafted swords, 2 flanged axes, 2 spiral bracelets, and a chisel. The associated finds date the deposition of the sky disc to the end of the Central European Early Bronze Age, so circa 1600 BC. However, it is highly likely that the disc itself had been manufactured some 100 to 200 years earlier. From technical observations, as well as the analysis of the gold inlays, a 5-phase reconstruction of the development of the imagery on the disc seems to be the likeliest sequence for the disc's development. So multiple stages here, and as we saw earlier, it seems to have been adapted as other astrological observations were made. In the earliest version, an elaborately encoded image reflects sophisticated astronomical knowledge. In subsequent stages, this was forgotten and replaced by traditional knowledge, which was focused on the interaction of the heavenly bodies at the horizon. And finally, this reduced knowledge gave way to mythology. Wow, so they're actually saying that earlier on there was sophisticated astronomical knowledge, and then later this was replaced by a tradition, and they're kind of insinuating or coming to the conclusion that this then gave way to mythology later on. Besides the changes to the motifs, the origins of the raw materials it was made from, copper, tin and gold, are also well understood. So yeah, we know copper and tin certainly, being mined and utilized for the production of bronze and stuff, and gold also seemed to have a, prominence in high status Bronze Age burials, for example. The chemical composition of the base material refers to an early bronze. So besides copper, the disc contains mostly tin, some nickel, zinc, and arsenic as well, interestingly. However, the specific steps involved into producing the disc are still the subject of speculation. It can be ruled out that the disc is a cast product, as the limited flow behavior of the molten metal could not form such a thin disc. So I'm guessing what they're saying is you've not got a very viscous liquid metal there, so it's going to start cooling off and hardening before it can fully spread into a really thin cast. And I suppose if it's not heat treated as well, it's going to be brittle. So I guess that's why they're saying it's been heat treated later on. It was determined that the disc was in fact produced by alternately hot forging and cast preform. Forging was carried out step by step, spiraling from its center to the rim. So they're working it from the middle point to the outside. The hot forging of a bronze with this chemical composition in the sky disc is limited to a fixed parameter setting with regard to temperature and maximum deformation. The clarification of the exact manufacturing process was the aim of this study. So this is what they're trying to ultimately find out, the exact manufacturing process. Therefore, the Nebra Sky Disc was metallographically investigated using the latest methods. Furthermore, several replicas of the Nebra Sky Disc were manufactured and analysed as well, so that they tried to recreate their own replicas using multiple different techniques. And then what they were doing is they were analysing, taking samples from that and analysing and comparing it against samples taken from the original to see, structurally and metallographically how similar they were. The comparisons of the microstructure of the original Nebra Sky Disc with the replicas provides detailed information about the manufacture process. Now, I'm not going to go into that because I'm not going to pretend that I know the science behind what they're doing here. I don't know the jargon behind it, so I just want to go to the results here and try and pick out some of the pertinent info. So during the first investigation of the Nebra Sky Disc, a small piece was cut out and they show you in figure 1 here where they took the sample. So from this area here, it's where they extracted it. This piece was used for the metallographic analysis of this work. It was not possible to take further samples from different areas of the disc because of its outstanding importance. So they didn't want to, you know, be digging into it because it's such an important piece. But the sample location represents an area of maximal treatment, especially a high deformation degree, if the disc is made by forging a preform. For this reason, it's appropriate to investigate the manufacturing process. Okay, so it's just going into quite a lot of jargon here, so let's have a look. The results from the microstructural analysis led to the assumption that the Nebra Sky Disc was made by forging a casted preform in combination with a heat treatment. Okay, so it looks like they cast something, and then what they were doing is forging it, so heating it up and hammering it to flatten it out to make this disc, this broad disc structure. The casting probably had a dendritic microstructure. I don't know what that means. If anybody's into metallurgy, let us know in the comments. And the casting probably had dendritic microstructure inferred by the inhomogeneous tin distribution with some casting defects. So it doesn't look like the tin was evenly distributed here, which caused some defects. During the forging, defects were deformed and compressed at the primarily homogeneous distribution. Gosh, sorry guys. With the primarily homogeneous distributed inclusions rearranged in lines. The forging initiates a high number of dislocations, and then this is the important bit here. A subsequent heat treatment led to the formation of new grains, and the microstructure transforms from dendritic to granular. So basically they're just saying here that the heat treating, the fact that they were going and heat treating it, it seemed to have benefits to the process. The formation of annealing twins is characteristic for recrystallization face-centric cubic metals. Okay, so we're going into a lot more jargon here, but I just wanted to point out here that it was a casted preform in combination with heat treatment. So a first casting, and then, as I said, heating it up and forging it to get the desired shape. So here, let's have a look into some of the what they did to manufacture a replica. So, and look at this information here, less than 5 millimeters thick in the center of the disc, going to just under 2 millimeters on the edge. So just think how fragile this thing's going to be. You know, it's been in the ground since 1600 BC. The thickness of the Nebra Sky Disc is between 4.6 millimeters in the center and between 1.5 and 1.8 millimeters on its edge. The manufacturing process of a bronze disc is complex because of its material characteristics. Without the modern techniques of material processing, manufacture of such a disc in the Bronze Age was challenging. The material had a poor castability because of its low content of tin and arsenic. That's why a cast of a thin disc of bronze seems not to have been feasible. So for whatever reason, due to the lack of additives, tin and arsenic, a thin pouring, so they couldn't pour it into the shape that they wanted originally. It didn't seem like a feasible thing for them to do. And this is the reason why it is assumed that the Nebra Sky Disc was manufactured by forging a casted preform. The significant change in geometry from the preform to the disc needs an experienced coppersmith because the work must be done manually. Before the manufacturing of the replica, it was necessary to acquire experiences in the materials handling. Yeah, because I suppose modern day metal workers, they're not going to be working with this type of metal, with this kind of content, because, you know, they were mixing metals. As we know, there was tin and arsenic, zinc and stuff all added to this, whereas modern day metal workers are not necessarily going to have the knowledge of working, certainly with those kind of ratios anyway. I mean, I'm not an expert in metallurgy, but, you know, they don't seem to be necessarily working with these compounds. The necessary force for forging decreases, and the maximum deformation degree of bronze rises with an increasing temperature. The forging was performed by a helical hammer strokes moving outwards from the center, so they were hammering from the center outwards. During the hot forging, the material's temperature and the formability decrease. Therefore, it seems to be consistent that within the Bronze Age, a bronze disc could only be produced by alternating hot forging and heating. And it just says here how the content of the metals that they were using in trying to create a replica. So it says the melt consisted of tin, iron, nickel, and zinc, seemingly to recreate what the original's made out of. There was no addition of noxious arsenic, which was detected in the Nebra Sky Disc. So they left out the arsenic. So that's the only thing they seem to have left out of their replica. So the influence of arsenic on the results of this study was considered to be negligible, and they believe that, you know, it was going to be negligible anyway. Sulfur is excluded too, although the microstructural analysis proves the existence of sulfides. So that's interesting to think, you know, sulfur or sulfides were certainly used in the original. The material's composition was measured by X-ray fluorescence, which is not able to measure sulfur. Furthermore, the existence of sulfides in the amount evident from the microstructural analysis was considered not to influence the formability. Okay, so they've left out the arsenic, they've left out the sulfur. They think they would have had a negligible effect anyway, and they're just left with the main metallic ingredients. Some preforms were casted and used for a first study to find an appropriate process route of smithing the alloy. Although the material composition is supposed to have a good cold formability, it was found that the required deformation degree is too high to convert the preform of the disc replica only by cold forming. So, whatever reason, they weren't able to create a replica just from this initial casting here. It took several trays to find a practicable way of forging the disc without crack propagation, so without cracking it, because as I said, it's probably going to be quite brittle. It was found that this took numerous cycles, each consisting of heating to nearly 700 degrees, immediately followed by helical hammer forging to deform the casted preform into a disc. So again, the heating up to 700 degrees. Okay, so they're taking a casting, then they're heating up to 700 degrees, they're hammering it with a hammer from the middle outwards to flatten it down into this disc. The forging converts the geometry stepwise to the preform of the disc. Thereby, the formability decreases, and then immediate heating increases the formability. So when they're heating it, it's going to help them to form it. During the smithing, the compact preform is then converted into a thin disc. The diameter increases significantly. The coppersmith used different hammers for the work. At the beginning, he was using a heavy hammer, relatively weighing 5 kg, while after a few cycles, the weight of the hammer was reduced to 2 kg, then 1.5 and then 1.1 respectively. So as it's getting thinner, as it's becoming more brittle, you know, you need less force and you want to be more delicate. For forging the rim, he used a small hammer with a round, slightly curved face, which weighed only 0.63 kilograms. The helical hammering is necessary to shift the material volume from the bulky center. Figure 5 shows the 4 replicas of our study. Each represents a single step of the manufacturing process. That's not great. My light's just gone out. Sorry, guys. Let me turn the brightness up here. Technical issues again, but never mind. We'll crack on. Where was I? Figure 5 shows the 4 replicas of our study, each representing a single step of the manufacturing process. So A, we have the cast preform. B, we have an intermediate stage, which was heated and forged, 1 cycle. B is an intermediate stage, 2 heated and forged 10 cycles. And then D is the disc, heated and forged, 55 cycles, finalized by an annealing treatment at nearly 750 degrees C for 10 minutes. So they were sustaining it for 10 minutes. So now let's take a look at that. So here you can see this is him hammering it out from the center outwards. creating your domed shape into a flat shape. And here's the stages here. So you've got the cast replica here, the cast preform in a dome. This is after it's been hammered and heated a few times, and then you see it moving on, and then finally heated and forged for 55 cycles to achieve the final shape there. So there we go. Super interesting stuff. The lens shape preform with a diameter of 130 millimeters and a thickness of 30 millimeters was made by open sand casting. So that's where they make a mold. So there's usually going to be wooden formwork around it. You're going to have sand in there, and then you compress a shape in to get your mold, and then you can just pour your molten liquid into the mold to create the cast. Before each forging operation, the material was heated to reduce the necessary forces and to increase the formability. Stage 1 shows the impact areas from the hammer, which struck the surface in a spiral movement from the inside to the outside. Thereby, the cast became flat and wide. Because of the work hardening, the formability is limited. The necessary deformation degree can only be reached by intermediate annealing. The annealing temperature is estimated by the experience of the coppersmith from the temperature colour. So he estimates the temperature based on the colour. An interim measurement by pyrometer showed that the temperature of the replica was around 700 degrees C. And during the subsequent hot forging, the material cooled down. It's going to cool down quite quickly. Consequently, the necessary forming forces increased and the formability decreased. The coppersmith registered that the necessary force he needed to deform the material. To prevent crack formation, forging had to be stopped at a certain temperature. It is not possible to define an exact value for the minimum temperature necessary for manual forging because of the influence by several conditions such as the chemical composition, the local deformation degree, and the local temperature. Thus, the workflow depends on the experience of the coppersmith. Stage 2 shows this process after being repeated 10 times, resulting in a flatter and wider shape. We've just looked at that. And then it says it took 55 cycles of heating and forging to form the stage 3 final disc with a deformation degree of circa 0.85. The shape of the replica is identical with the original Nebra Sky Disc, which has a diameter of 315 to 320 millimeters, a thickness of 4.5 millimeters in the center and 1.7 meters on the outside. And then it says the last step of the material treatment is a stress relief heat treatment to reduce internal stresses. So we're not going to dive into the microstructure. It's all and the tin distribution, because it's all kind of jargon and it's too technical for me to dive into. Now, I just want to go into this discussion quickly here because they just highlight some interesting information here. The Nebra Sky Disc is an impressive reflection of the profound astronomical knowledge of the early Bronze Age Unetice culture in central Germany. Moreover, it proves the existence of an advanced understanding of metal treatment during this period. The manufacturing of the disc differs from the making of other artifacts from the early Bronze Age, e.g. the bronze axes. To be fit for purpose, axes must have a high hardness at the cutting edge. Obviously, that's the area that we want to keep sharp for a long period of time. Due to the low tin content of most axes, in the early Bronze Age, production focused on work hardening. Ornaments or ritual objects had to be durable and visually appealing. Sheet metal ornaments, which are especially found in the regions along the Danube, are basically comparable to the Sky Disc in the way of production, but they are much smaller and thinner. So as I said, they have found similar things, but they're a lot smaller and thinner. Extending a cast bronze preform to a disc the size and thickness of the Nebra Sky Disc requires a complex sequence of heating and forging. The observations made on the replica represent the microstructural evolution of a bronze during the treatment. Casting of the bronze is the first step. The fluidity of the melt is limited and inhibits the manufacturing of the disc only by casting.
Thus, it is necessary to cast a preform. So they're just going into more information about that. Excuse me. Let me just find. Here we go. This is what we want. Comparing microstructures of the different replica stages with the Nebra Sky Disc allows us to infer the manufacturing process of the UNESCO World Heritage document. It must be noted that the replica manufacturing was a manual work based on the experience of the coppersmith. It is neither possible nor the aim to rebuild the Nebra Sky Disc with strict and defined parameters. And it says here that the Nebra Sky Disc is the result of the manual work of an experienced coppersmith. That's why it's consistent to rely on an experienced coppersmith to make the replicas. So, it is already known that the Nebra Sky Disc was finished after forging by damascening the inlays and probably a patination of the surface. Based on the new microstructural investigation, it is now possible to understand the process of the manufacturing of the bronze disc as well, and the result demonstrates the importance of forging in Bronze Age metallurgy, which is often seen and researched mainly from the perspective of metal casting. And this is true, there's plenty of YouTube videos showing people, casting recreations of these old Bronze Age swords. However, forging, there's not a lot of there doesn't seem to be a lot of material out there on Bronze Age forging. The Nebra Sky Disc is an extraordinary relic of the early Bronze Age and an impressive example of the profound knowledge that was available in the Unetise culture. Furthermore, its manufacture was by no means trivial. While the production of axes and sheet metal jewellery by forging techniques was common practice in the Central European Early Bronze Age, the Nebra Sky Disc is, according to current knowledge, unique in its shape, size and volume. The influences of the Unetise culture on early Bronze Age metallurgy has often been discussed, with a particular focus on innovative casting techniques. In this context, the Nebra Sky Disc documents that the Unetise culture craftsmen were excellent and innovative coppersmiths with extensive experience in sophisticated bronze manufacturing, including casting, forging, and heat treatment. So there we go. It's going to go into the methods that they used. We're not going to dive into that, but I just wanted to show you, because I thought you'd be quite interested to see that it just seems to highlight sorry, I'm in the dark here. It seems to highlight just how the knowledge that they had back then. So they even knew about heat treating it and having to go through multiple processes of casting, heating, shaping, and then heat treating. So that's quite advanced for something that could potentially be 3,600 years old, which is what they're trying to say there. So there you go, guys. That's just going to be a roundup of everything I've been collecting over the last few weeks, about 8 weeks there, just to show you. Let me just have a quick look in the chat again, because I just want to keep up with everybody. Yes, that's Carl makes another good comment here. You have to balance the heat and the hammering. You obviously, the problem is when it can get very brittle, which is why they have to heat treat it afterwards to give it that rigidity as well. So you're always treading a fine line between heating it up so you can mold it and move it, but then also it becoming brittle. And even when they were plating, they could plate metals by the time they could do that, they saw being able to plate a metal in gold. They saw it as that metal taking on the qualities of gold, and they would even chant certain phrases over it while, kind of like incantations while they were doing this metallurgy as well. So yeah, it was definitely, you could see how in their minds it's seen as a form of magic here. I'm just having a look here in the chat, guys. Yeah, it's interesting, Mutley, you mentioned Hephaestus, because I believe there's a couple of sources which say Pelasgus seem to be involved in the cult of Hephaestus as well, or seem to spread it. So that's very interesting, or certainly have associations with it. I'm going to have to, this is just off the top of my head. But interesting that you mention here that you say Hephaestus was a pre-i.e. Thracian god like Ares. So just thought I'd mention that there, because obviously Pelasgus, as we said, the Pelasgians, they seem to retain certain non-Indo-European elements potentially there. Okay, so I'm just going to say thank you to everybody for checking in. Great to see you, Ann Dixon. Thank you very much for being here. Thanks, Sapionite, for joining us. Thanks, Ian Briggs. Thanks, Amber Miller. Thank you, Carl Karsnark, Sar Lux, JRD, Loki, Mauliola, Watson. Thank you so much. Mutley, Ian Briggs, data being collected as well. Great to see you. So I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know in the comments if this is the kind of thing that you're interested in, having a look at a few interesting news articles as well as the presentations. I'm going to be looking at Achilles next and his connections to Scythia. So some sources out there write Achilles, a lord of Scythia. They also seem to be a cult worship of Achilles in the Black Sea region as well. So we're going to be looking at that in the next presentation. So that's what I'm going to be planning. I'm also going to be getting back out on site. I'm planning on going down to London to the British Museum to look at the Briganti finds that were made at Stanwick, which is in the video that I released just on Friday. If you haven't seen that, please go and give it a watch. I'm very, very happy with how that turned out. And I think you're going to enjoy it because it's a huge, huge site. As I said, a 9-kilometre perimeter from the Iron Age. They found remains of Celtic roundhouses. They found chariot fittings and everything. So yeah, it's super interesting. So give it a watch if you haven't already. Thanks everybody for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. You take care, everyone. Oh, thanks, Violence is Life. Thanks for that feedback there. Thanks, James Wells. Thanks for the feedback. I'm pleased you enjoyed it. Have a good evening, guys, and take care. All the best.